seconds just to make sure it shows up where we need it to be. All right, awesome. It looks like we are live, and if I can, I'll get like a link to it during the stream. But for now, we're just gonna go and start going at it. Guys, what is up in the U-Box? This is Top Hat Productions 115. I have a guest star with me.
Hello, this is Kid.
Awesome. Now, before we go any further, actually, let me go in and bring my microphone here a little bit closer. Before we go any further, I've decided to actually make it so that these updates happen on a monthly basis like I used to. These updates are going to happen either at the beginning or at the end of the month, depending on how things go. But for this one, it's going to be near the end of the month. With that said, there are still planned to be some bi-weekly videos. I'm just checking the network health of the stream right now because I saw a little bit of stutter on my control panel here, but it looks as though everything should be good so far. In fact, what I'm going to go in and do is I'm going to see if I can get a link to the stream right now. I'm pretty sure I can do that. This will just take a second. Yes, we are indeed live. Let me just go in to the stream right now. That's perfect. So in that case, I'm just going to go in and give that to you right now. That's the YouTube link. I think the audio should be good for the most part, but I'm going to need you to actually say something right now during the stream to make sure that everyone else can hear you as well.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. That's solid.
The audio should be good for the most part. Waiting for a few seconds. Actually say something right now during the stream to make sure that everyone else can hear you as well.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Alright, that's perfect.
Awesome, okay. I just wanted to make sure because sometimes when I like bring someone else on, it's just quiet for some reason. But this time I can be sure that everyone can be heard. So with that, I'm going to go on and start jumping into the topics. The first one I have here listed is kind of the live streaming one. You've live streamed before though, right?
Of course.
Yeah. What is the biggest challenge that you run into in live streaming?
I think from my time on Twitch, kind of like I tended to have like issues when I used like other like recording software, so I started using Twitch Studio, and I think that kind of helped out a lot. Yeah, I think that's kind of my biggest error was sometimes lag time, sometimes like volume. Sometimes when I played music in the background, like it wouldn't hear the music or wouldn't be like an add-on. But after I got situated, it's perfect.
I had some of those same issues when starting out, but my biggest one was always, I think it was always pretty much GPU power once I got audio and everything else fixed. Do you know why?
Why?
Because back in the beginning, like even when it wasn't even really like the power of my GPU holding me back per se, like I had a GTX 550 Ti, and as a lot of us already know, the GTX 550 Ti Fermi in general just doesn't have hardware encoding at all. It doesn't have NVENC. So I would, or not just I, but other people, anyone using that card would be stuck pretty much with using software of some sort, whether it be, I think it was NVQVENC, or if you just did it through H.264 on CPU. But the first hurdle was when I had that GPU that didn't have hardware encoding, it was me trying to get more frames out of the GPU, as so to say. I had the GPU rendering the game, and then I was using NVQVENC to also make it sit there and try to encode or transcode frames, if I remember correctly. Moving on to Pascal, when I finally got my first card with NVENC, GTX 1060 with, it was the 6 gig model. But when I had the 1060, I was able to actually move away from the GPU limitation for a bit because I was only streaming in 1080p. And as a result of streaming in 1080p, I was able to actually get away with doing software X264. I had the dual Xeon rig when I had the 1060, and as a result, I was able to just pretty much have the X5680s, a pair of them, actually do the encoding and transcoding, and they worked out pretty well for the most part, except for if my system was really being hit by like a really heavy game. like, oh no, I have like a 100% CPU utilization scenario. All of a sudden, I'm dropping frames because guess what? The encoder is using my processor. And if I just happen to be sitting at 100% and everything just starts going to crap, the stream becomes as crunchy as Taco Bell.
Nice. All right. I feel you on that, man. I used to have like sometimes slight issues like that, but my new gaming laptop has like a GTX 1050 Ti, so I've been kind of cruising as far as like the output.
NVENC is amazing, I have to say. But the one thing that I missed about using Software X264 was the fact that I didn't have to worry about what happens if my GPU gets pegged at 100%. You know why?
Right?
Because the thing is, and this is something I kind of learned somewhat recently because I wasn't always into multimedia. But while the encoding or transcoding can either be done in software or in hardware, some of the processing, if I remember correctly, like you know, and I can probably pull it up right now, but psycho visual tuning and stuff like that. I'm just gonna go and pull it up. Psycho.
You said what version did you use?
I'm actually using OBS in the latest version, but things like cycle visual tuning and other features that help to, I guess, enhance the quality of a stream actually happen on GPU a lot of times nowadays. So, for example, if there's like a really intense part of a game or a scene that is on screen, right? And or if more bitrate is needed, right? For example, if I go into like a really detailed part of a game, or I go into a really fast-paced portion of the game where either more bitrate, more detail, or more frames are needed, well, guess what? The GPU is going to be handling that load. Cycle visual tuning, inserting more frames. Well, not inserting more frames. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Is it called B frames? I'm going to go on and try to pull this up right now. I'd rather actually get this right while I'm here. I think so, but I'm going to stick with cycle visual tuning for now, because I'm pretty sure that people already know what that is, and it won't require as much of an explanation. But features like cycle visual tuning, and you know what, why is there not? There we go. Found it. Cycle visual tuning. Cycle visual tuning enables encoder options that optimize the use of bitrate for increased perceived visual quality, especially in situations with high motion at the cost of increased GPU usage. The result is that some quality that is hard for humans to perceive is sacrificed to improve quality of what can actually be perceived. In practice, this should make things like fine text and grass look sharper, although at times it can degrade other things. So that's just one feature that's kind of impacted by how much horsepower your GPU has. But there are other features as well, where if your GPU just isn't strong enough to actually deliver that type of stuff, you end up having to turn that off. Or if you do have it turned on, it pretty much causes your system to start lagging.
Yeah.
Now, in my case, I had a GTX 1060 back, I think, in 2018, and the dual Xeons were handling transcoding, so none of that really applied to me because most of that stuff just wasn't a thing. It wasn't available to me.
Mm-hmm.
And at 1080p, it didn't really matter because my Xeons were more than enough to push really good quality 1080p.
Yeah.
But once I moved up above 1440p, like, because here's what happened. I went from 1080p to trying to plan out 4K recently.
Okay.
But then dropping back down to like 3K resolution. Because 4K is just way too intense. And the crazy part was...
like...
Oh, go on and say...
get on the 4K wave, man. I recently, like, I think... Yeah, I'm really trying to make that push. I'm wondering what other things I can do to, like, kind of... Even if I technically don't have the, like... specs to be able to like run that constantly, like to figure out ways that like how it would look. I don't know if I'm kind of phrasing this properly, but I'm trying to like push the same from 1080p regular to 4K from 3K, and I don't know how to like I don't really notice too much of the difference quite yet, or if I'm like adjusting things properly. But if you have like any like tips for something like that, please put me on.
The current tip, and it's not going to sound too encouraging, is to avoid 4K, and it's for reasons I'm about to go into really soon.
Why is that?
One of the big ones is networking limitations. But remember how I mentioned like psychovisual tuning and B-frames and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the features that require extra GPU grunt, more horsepower, right? Well, when you're rendering 1080p, you're rendering 1980 by 1080. Imagine what happens when you jump to 4K.
Oh yeah.
4 times as much like visual data being pushed, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So one of the big hurdles is just how much processing has to be done in order to push 4K, because gaming at 4K is intense for modern GPUs that we can actually afford.
Mm-hmm.
In fact,
speaking of afford, like I've been looking for GPUs that are like really high quality, and I think we both know the reason why they're either overpriced now or unavailable.
supply cannot meet demand, whether it be an unprecedented wave of new gamers coming in, or maybe miners, or maybe people need those GPUs now more than ever for general compute purposes. With a lot of people staying at home, a lot more people are looking for GPUs for whatever reasons.
Yeah.
More than what was the audience that wants a GPU or needs a GPU has increased. And the supply that a lot of the manufacturers had planned out, like AMD and NVIDIA, did not meet demand. They weren't expecting like this unprecedented stay-at-home thing to come in and just eat up everything they had.
Okay.
And up until recently, like I was
really
thinking, oh, you were saying?
No, I said no. That's a really great point.
Yeah, and up until recently, though, I was somewhat of the opinion that it could have been miners, but then from a few recent videos I had seen, it's not exactly the miners, like the cryptocurrency miners, that are really causing it. From what I'm seeing, from what I'm hearing,
Really?
it's generally just that kind of the new stay-at-home audience, or should I say, the stay-at-home buyers now. It really seems that a lot more people staying at home are just looking for GPUs.
Got it.
Which is like
Yeah.
both a good and a bad thing. I mean, the good thing is we have a lot more people now who are being introduced possibly to PC gaming and just PC hardware in general. So I'm happy about that. The bad thing is, supply chain is going to have to adjust heavily for it, from what I'm seeing.
Very much so. Very much so. Might even be a time I invest a little bit more in Nvidia or something, because it's really crazy out here.
Like the instantaneous is like, oh, there's GPUs available. All of a sudden, you hit F5 and seconds later they're gone.
Heck yeah. So, for the catalog, from what I'm seeing, have you ever done capture card testing before, or this would be something you were just starting to try get into?
My first capture card was actually one that I had when I had the GTX 1060. It was an Elgato HD60 Pro. And the HD60 Pro was a nice piece of kit, because if you were recording, then it had an on-board hardware encoder that would actually handle things for you. However, if you were live streaming and if you weren't using the Elgato software, game over. It was using whatever your PC had. So it was a very specific use case where it was optimal to use it. Well, I mean, not optimal to use it, but a very specific use case where the hardware encoder kicked in. If you're using the Elgato software, specifically using the Elgato software, and also recording, it would use the encoding or transcoding hardware on the capture card. Otherwise, if you're live streaming with the Elgato software or with OBS, and if you were recording with OBS, chances are you weren't using much of the hardware that was on the capture card. But the capture card itself was a very nice convenience, up until recently, at least for me, in terms of software. In fact, I ended up actually giving it to a friend recently because of the fact that it kind of fell out of use of my workflow. I think I talked about it a few months ago, but with like one of the more recent Elgato software updates, it went from actually detecting my current sound card to just not detecting it at all. And as a result, like, it just had to go.
Gotcha. Yeah, I get that.
But during the time when it worked amazingly. I actually have a few videos on my channel from when it worked, but man, sort of wishing that they had actually fixed that issue at some point, because I haven't gone back to Elgato for capture hardware ever since.
Gotcha.
In fact, I think, Elgato got brought up by Corsair a while ago, but I'm going to go on and hop back on topic. The big reason why the push to 4K is kind of moot at this time is because of network limitations more than anything.
Okay. Let's say I have that, I don't know if you've seen the advertisements, but Xfinity made that push to like a gig, and just like set it up in the house, I think. And so I'm pretty sure, like, technically, I think that should meet the requirements, yeah?
Well, let's just go ahead and assume that you do. For uploading 4K, then, that's the easy part for you. The hard part's going to be when your audience goes to watch it, right? Because a lot of your audience might be on a data plan, or they might not be on as good of a network as you. So when they go to watch it, they're most likely watching it at a lower resolution, which kind of reduces that return on investment of going for 4K. Very few people, except for a very small or minute enthusiast audience, is probably going to watch in 4K.
Gotcha. That does make sense.
And out of the people who do have the money and the wherewithal to go 4K, how many of them are actually packing 4K monitors? A lot of people are going with lower resolution 1440p or 1080p monitors or ultra-wides, even if they have the money for 4K.
Yeah, that's true.
But we can't really fault them for going with it, because of the fact that in the end, half the time going for 4K capable hardware is expensive. And on the other hand, even if it isn't expensive for you, well, how many people are actually... It's like I buy a 4K monitor, but then I also have to make sure that my network is capable of ingesting and moving 4K video to my computer. So I need to have a data plan or an internet plan that's capable of handling 4K content, not really guaranteed. And then on top of that, I also need to make sure that I have hardware that's capable of transcoding or decoding 4K, which is, by, I think, modern standards, should be possible in most cases with things like Intel QuickSync and stuff like that. But if the network that you're on isn't that good, then you're going to run into the first and major bottleneck of 4K, which is can't bring all that data down in a, I'm just going to say in a decent manner for now, in a practical manner, which means there will be a lot of buffering, a lot of choppiness and lag, where you're trying to watch the video, but instead it's constantly loading, which ruins the entire watching experience.
That's very true.
And the whole thing just becomes a complete another crap show if you try to do 4K 60, because, well, guess what? Twice the frames trying to move through the same slow network.
Yeah. What other streaming issues have you like had when you're using OBS, or in general? Like what are some streaming tips that maybe I can incorporate? Like if I decide to keep it regular, or some ways to even learn how to stream better. I would really like for my stream to start looking like these pro streamer stuff.
Now, I must warn you, I am not a pro streamer, but what I will say is this. Before I even started encountering the networking issue, there is the issue of horsepower. Because when it comes to live streaming, like the two things I had to balance really was, one, can my encoding device handle what I'm sending through it? And secondly, post-processing and things that may happen behind the scenes. So, for example, NVENC truly can handle 4K in many instances as long as the rest of your computer is decent. But if your GPU is sitting at a massive 100% utilization, like let's say that you're playing a game that's really GPU heavy, right? And the NVENC encoder itself could be doing just fine. Cycle visual tuning, B-frames, and other features that use GPU compute and CUDA all of a sudden kick in, and it's like, whoa, now it looks like a choppy mess. So one thing is being able to actually kind of tell when you will and won't need those features. Because if you're playing a game that's going to really pin your GPU, you may have to turn down game settings. You may have to actually create specific, settings or profiles in game for when you're live streaming compared to when you're just playing casually. So for instance, if I'm playing something like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, then I might have to go in and actually make changes because I currently have a 4K monitor. It's going to try to run natively at 4K unless I tell it to go at a different resolution. And I haven't even made these adjustments yet for Assassin's Creed because I haven't tried it on the 4K panel yet. But I know that in due time I'm going to have to. So I may have to turn down things like visual quality. And in OBS, I may have to turn down things on that end as well. I may have to I wouldn't turn down bitrate. But what I may have to do is turn off something like B-frames, or I may have to turn off, in fact, let me see here. I'm going to go on and pull up my settings right now because I might be using the wrong name for one of those. I just want to make sure that I'm actually getting this right. Output, and no, it's called look ahead. I used the wrong term. Sorry about that, guys. It is called look ahead. You can't turn off B-frames. I'm an idiot. You're not using OBS though, right?
Oh, I use Twitch Studio.
Is Twitch Studio based off of OBS though?
Maybe. Let me check it out. I'm entering it now. I'm gonna look it up online.
Twitch Studio is... I do not know what it's based off of, but I'll have to look into it at some point.
It's an OBS alternative. It used a lot of the structure of OBS because OBS is the de facto standard for streamers.
Nice. I'm going to go on and make a correction right now myself just because of the fact that I'm an idiot and I used the term B-frames incorrectly. B-frames, because I have the time to correct myself, and I should. Yes. I'm going to go on and pull them up. In fact, I think it's on an NVIDIA website. Yeah, it's on the NVIDIA website. Where is... It's not letting me scroll for some reason, son of a gun. Okay. Look ahead. Oh, okay. Never mind. I'm not too much of an idiot. Look ahead is actually related to B-frames. Look ahead allows the encoder to dynamically select the number of B-frames between 0 and the number of B-frames that you specify. So that's why my brain was mixing them up. Look ahead simply adjusts the number of B-frames dynamically depending on the situation. B-frames... Yeah, B-frames are great because they increase image quality, but they consume a lot of your available bitrate, so they reduce quality on high motion content. Look ahead enables the best of both worlds. This feature is CUDA accelerated. Toggle this off if your GPU utilization is high to ensure a smooth stream. Awesome. And on here it also has a nice little explanation for psychovisual tuning as well. Psychovisual tuning enables the rate distortion optimization in the encoder, which greatly optimizes the way that you use bitrate, improving image quality on movement. Awesome. So one adjusts bitrate usage dynamically, and the other one adjusts the number of B-frames used dynamically.
Hey, you learn something new every day, man.
And out of these two, I currently have look ahead enabled and cycle visual tuning disabled. But yeah, sorry for using B-frames and look ahead interchangeably like that, or using B-frames as the term look ahead. I should have been using look ahead. Just want to make sure I get that clear. With that said though, those two features both use GPU horsepower. And if your GPU is already pegged at 100% in a game, you're in for the hurt locker. So being able to tune the game for when you're in the middle of a live stream, knowing how the game will impact your GPU, and adjusting it in advance so that the stream doesn't take a hit as a result, and knowing when you may need look ahead or psychovisual tuning and when to leave one of them or both of them turned off is going to greatly help out. Especially if you're using GPU accelerated features. One of the other things... Oh, you're saying?
I was like, all right, awesome.
One of the other things that I had to kind of work on and grapple with was finding out what bitrate I actually need to be at. Now, in my case, I had it a little bit easy, and that was because of the fact that, I had already kind of dabbled with and experimented with changes in resolution before when I made the jump from like 720p to 1080p, and as a result, I ended up seeing like how big the increase was, and I pretty much knew, okay, the next big jump that I make is going to probably more than double the bitrate that I need. The real question is how much I need. And I ended up jumping, I think it was 1080p, I had like maybe 8 to 10 kilobits? No. It was either 8,000 or 10,000 kilobits. And then I ended up jumping from like 10 or 13 to just 13 and above for 3K. So I had it kind of easy because the jump for me wasn't as big as I was expecting it to be. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think YouTube actually has, I think they have a utility where it shows like what bitrate the video is at, but I can't really pull it up right now. But maybe I can pull up data on that at some point for what I've used in the past. I think for 1080p I was using like between 8 and 13. But then I ended up having to jump directly up to like 13,000 and above. It was pretty intense though, because when I first started trying to stream 4K through Restream during like the initial testing phase, like the technicians, they were like wondering, okay, how are you streaming 4K to like Twitch? Because like supposedly they don't allow for like non-partner streamers to actually use 4K. And not only that, I was able to actually view the 4K streams afterward.
Nice. Okay.
And I was pushing 4K to both YouTube and Twitch at that time.
Oh, I might need to make a change, man, because I get like that.
Now, the issue was the initial testing was only on desktop, right? So I'm streaming like a static image. As soon as I got into gaming, it was terrible. And I started out with something really easy too, like Minecraft at 4K. And it was disgusting. I still have a lot of the test footage on YouTube, but Twitch I think automatically like removes content if you don't make highlights of it after a while. And YouTube probably still shows like the majority of just how bad it was. Because the initial settings I used completely slaughtered my poor GTX 1080. Anyone who was watching, they saw the utter mess and nightmare that it was, because I didn't know what I was in for at first. The GTX 1080 did not have the horses to push 4K gaming while also streaming 4K. So even after like overclocking and readjusting settings and stuff like that, I knew for a fact, okay, I might have to drop to a lower resolution. And that's how I ended up at 3K initially. Then I ended up getting Titan XP. Titan XP was able to pull off the task a little bit better, but I'm still stuck at 3K because of the fact of just how intense it is trying to push 4K.
Got it.
And for me, it isn't a networking issue. It is still a GPU horsepower issue, surprisingly. For most people, it would be a networking issue. But for me, it ended up being a GPU horsepower issue where it's like, if you want a game at 4K, it's already intense enough. Your GPU is probably sitting at around 90 to 80% utilization. And as soon as I try to stream it, if I have look ahead or cycle visual tuning turned on, it's on.
Makes sense.
So,
Alright.
and it kind of surprised me because a lot of people were always saying it would be a networking issue. But no, for me, GPU issue. So I guess it's one of those uncommon things that don't really come up too often, where you have the network, but your hardware just can't handle it quite yet.
Mm-hmm. Did you end up building your own CPU later on after that come up?
Oh, you mean the CPU design project that I mentioned?
No, just personal. Like, did you end up building your own?
I'm
To one that would be able to handle all those limitations and kind of
my own system.
so-
As of now, so you mean like building my own setup that can handle it?
Yeah.
The only way to get over this big of a hurdle would be something with substantially more horsepower, since I've switched completely from software H.264, which is on the processor, to GPU accelerated, hardware accelerated H.264. And the only way to jump that hurdle is to legitimately just get a bigger, more powerful GPU. One that can handle things like cycle visual tuning and look ahead, and also encode transcode at 4K at the same time for live streaming. The first generation that could probably handle it would probably be the RTX cards. So maybe I should get like an RTX Titan next. That is, if I can even afford it. Because I'm currently using a Titan XP right now.
Okay.
And even the Titan XP is kind of struggling with the task at times, but nowhere near as badly as the GTX 1080. The Titan XP is a monster, and for the most part, it is smooth sailing at 3K.
Gotcha. And the Titan XP looks like a really good GPU I'm seeing online.
It's a nice GPU, but it's not a good value GPU. I managed to grab mine for like $600, so I got it for a really good price, but a lot of other sellers were pushing it for like $1,000 and over.
Yeah, for sure. That's
Yeah,
what I'm seeing.
I ended up lucking out like majorly. And I got it like right as prices were starting to go up again.
Oh yeah, well, that makes sense. Nice catch.
But yeah,
Because every time I'm looking at every single site, and unless you buy from secondhand sellers, everything's out of stock. Really doesn't have anything in.
Yeah, that GPU shortage really, it's going to be around for probably at least a year, if not longer. It's going to take a while for manufacturers and supply chain to catch up with just how much demand has been created by the stay-at-home situation.
Very much so.
But yeah. So in terms of my, or maybe even our current situation, the 4K live streaming issue is a pincer of an attack, at least from our perspective. We're being pincered from raw GPU horsepower limitations because we don't have cards that can quite game and stream at 4K yet. Not at least without a substantial upgrade, which incurs heavy monetary costs on both of us. But then even if we do go through with that and go full crazy, ignoring the fact that it would completely bust our wallets, we have the network limitation on the side of our clients and viewers, because most people really don't have a reason to go for 4K viewing yet.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to alleviate that would be introduction of technologies like AV1 and other I'll call it bitrate efficient encoding technologies or transcoding technologies, which haven't quite caught on yet, that haven't been quite fully developed yet, or even if they are fully developed, they aren't being implemented in quite enough products yet where it can become widespread, widely used, and something that we can actually leverage at this time. We need GPUs to start coming with AV1 hardware at this point. That will take care of the networking limitation at the very least. Because
what do I type in to learn more? It's a what hardware?
AV1, Alpha Victor 1. By using encoding technologies that are more bitrate efficient, it might be easier to actually send a higher quality stream over a more limited network. I'm oversimplifying it, but AV1 could be the solution to the issue that HVEC and H.265 was supposed to be before the licensing issues kicked in and just made it a complete and other crappy option in terms of value.
Oh my God.
The licensing side of H.264 was decent enough where almost every device in the world can handle H.264. But H.265 has a very crappy licensing situation right now where anyone who tries to use it will be bled dry for like every client that they put the technology in.
Yeah. Dang.
Which means we can't really rely on H.265 for streaming because H.265 is too expensive to save live streaming at this point. It's going to be on AV1 and other technologies to kind of to make 4K anywhere near viable at this point, I think. Maybe VP9 also, but who knows? I haven't looked into VP9 much. There are other people on my Discord server who are looking into it, but I haven't touched VP9 much.
Me neither. Hey bro, I'm seeing a lot of good key points here. I gotta go soon, but I'm seeing an upcoming Linux VM, and you know about SolarWinds? Okay.
Yeah, SolarWinds has been kicking around for like over a month now. I think the initial event started like over a month ago, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kicked off, and after that kind of tapered off. And now what we're looking at is kind of like the after effects of it as people in the field start to investigate more. They're seeing more and more. It's kind of like a how do I describe it? It is kind of like an earthquake, kind of, or something like that. The initial event happens, tons of destruction, and then after that, as it starts to taper off, other things start to happen, if I remember correctly. It's like you can have like a major earthquake and then after that like other minor earthquakes afterward, I think, right? Or is it the other way around?
I think that sounds about right.
It might not be too good of a description, but it's like the major event happened, all the damage has been done, but now they're starting to see more and more hints of just how much damage was actually done.
Actually, yeah, that's real.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where the initial event hits, and you're thinking, oh, it can't get much worse, but then you're just seeing more and more of what happened as more of the investigation goes down. It's just like, oh, that was a lot more damaging than we thought.
Yeah, no doubt.
And to be quite honest, my real concern for that would be just how far did it go, and like when will we see the end of its reach, kind of, because it looks pretty disgusting right now, to say the least. I'm not going to get into too much detail about it because it seems like it's a very complicated topic that I don't feel qualified to discuss. But I don't remember the last time I saw anything that big, or at least that advertised in the news.
Yeah, dude, it's insane. Like, I just hear about that type of stuff, like around stuff. So it's been quite surprising.
I could probably go for like a documentary on that, just because of like, it's like 1 month later we're still talking about it, just because of how much of an impact it had. And to be quite honest, there's probably a lot of lessons that could be learned from it. definitely in terms of cybersecurity. But I'm not going to talk too much on it because of the fact that I know for a fact that I'm not a cybersecurity expert, and there are other people who I used to live stream with who probably know more about cybersecurity than I do. Maybe I can try to ask one of them to come on one of these days and maybe go over some of the details about SolarWinds.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But yeah, since you mentioned the Linux VM, I'm going to go on and kind of run through what the Linux VM is going to entail, because I have that like kind of right in front of me right now, I think.
Alright.
Yep, got it right in front of me right now.
What VMs do you usually use? Because on I usually used to use this one called Kimu, but I already had like my computer was already flashed with Linux, so I didn't, it wasn't like in a VM. Like I had Ubuntu 18 on it, and I used this let me see if I'm typing it right. It was called Kimu.
Well, I mean, Kimu's purpose is to be, it is a
virtualizer.
Yeah, it's a virtualizer and an emulator. Kimu is capable of emulating hardware.
Yeah, and I think it was like a really great voice when I was, like as I was working. I really like Kimu instead. So that's kind of what I've been doing now, just using Kimu. And for like VMs, I try to use Virtualbox, but that tends to have errors and stuff like that. So, and even lately, my Kali
Linux VM.
Yeah, my Kali VMs keeps bugging, so I'm kind of wondering what I have to set it to before I go into it.
I'm gonna go in and jump just through 3 quick topics real fast, or at least explanations. There's Linux KVM, there's Kimu, and then I'm gonna go on and mention maybe ESXi and VirtualBox. Linux KVM, if I remember correctly, is it a Type 1? I need to look this up. It's either Type 1 or Type 2. It is indeed a hypervisor, but Linux KVM is, Linux KVM. KVM stands for kernel-based virtual machine, right? Linux KVM stands for kernel-based virtual machine. Not to be confused with KVM, keyboard, video, mouse. But it's a virtualization module in the Linux kernel, and it is it's something that's meant to act as a hypervisor. In fact, it was merged into the Linux kernel mainline in kernel version 2.6.20, which was pushed out and released on February 5th, 2007. KVM requires a processor with hardware virtualization extensions. But I'm going to go on and jump to the important part here, because there's something here that's going to tell me what type of hypervisor it is. Is it Type 1 or Type 2? I think that the consensus might be Type 1. Okay, never mind. I have an answer here from back in 2017. It's on server fault, and I'll include a link to it. But, long story short, KVM is not a clear case, and it can actually be categorized as either one. The KVM kernel module turns Linux kernel into a Type 1 bare metal hypervisor, while the overall system could be categorized to Type 2 because the host OS is still fully functional and the other VMs are standard Linux processes from its perspective. The desktop environment, i.e. GUI, has less to do with this. It's more clear if we compare this to Hyper-V, where the hypervisor is a distinct layer beneath all of the virtual machines. So Linux KVM is kind of difficult to categorize because it can be categorized as both. Linux KVM is a virtualization platform. It is used for running VMs. Kimu, on the other hand, its primary purpose is not specifically virtualization, but emulation. One is virtualizing software. I'm going to oversimplify this, but one is virtualization on a software level. The other is virtualization on a hardware level. One says I can emulate a processor and make it so you can run things that are meant to run on different hardware architectures on your x86 or whatever platform you're currently on. The other says, hey, you can run a VM, and regardless of the software that's running, it should work. So for example, if I wanted to run an ARM build of Android on an x86 computer, I might use QEMU, because I need to first emulate the ARM processor, the ARM SoC, and then from there, I need to be able to run a VM on top of that emulated processor. QEMU kicks in because of the fact that I need to emulate the ARM processor. Once again, I'm oversimplifying, but QEMU is great for those workloads. It is the emulation platform to use, especially if you're on Linux. Now, jumping over to Linux KVM. Linux KVM is meant for VMs and virtualization on the software level. If I need to run, for example, Windows on a Linux host, then I can make, or spin up a Linux, I can spin up a Windows VM on Linux using Linux KVM. Now, if I remember correctly, I mentioned something about Virtualbox. Virtualbox is strictly a Type 2 hypervisor that has to run in the OS. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. I'm thinking it's a Type 2. Is Virtualbox a Type 2? I'm like pulling up information I haven't touched in a while because of the fact that I barely even use it anymore. Yes, indeed. Virtualbox is a Type 2 hypervisor.
But yeah, bro, yes, sorry. I have a family meeting matters to attend to now, but thank you so much for putting me on to so much, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the stream.
No problem. I'll keep you posted, and let me know if you're able to join the call again.
Alright, man. Have a great day at work tomorrow, and I'll see you.
Same to you, dude. Okay guys, so hopefully the explanations I provided up until now were a good enough overview of things to kind of give you food for thought, at least for everything that we've covered. It's about 48 minutes into the stream, and I think I've hit a good amount of the points I was planning on covering, but not quite everything yet. So I'm going to go on and hop into the rest of the stuff right now, because I already covered live streaming very heavily. I also covered SolarWinds and the fact that I kind of want to wait until we have someone who's experienced here. But now that I'm on the topic, let's cover the topic of the new look. What you're seeing right now is a nice little plugin called, in fact, I need to find the name of it right now because it's amazing. You know what, I got this. It's in my folder right about, as if it can load fast enough. It is a plugin for OBS called Spectralizer. And Spectralizer is what is making it so that the stream isn't as boring right now, so that you aren't looking at my boring desktop and instead can see my voice visualized. Because this is primarily a talking heads video, and, well, it's more dynamic than looking at a static picture of a galaxy at this point. So if you want to use that, I'll probably include links to that in the description as well. That's the mystery behind the new look. Secondly, let me go on and pull up the topics. Yes, capture card testing has been delayed yet again because there are lots of other things I actually have to get to that are kind of more pressing at this point. The capture card also won't really have much of an impact on my current workflow until these other changes get made. Primarily, those changes have to do with my transition over to the server and also to the new hardware that's going to be in the server. I'll probably get into that in the next few minutes, but I'll talk about the capture card afterward. Firstly, for Project Personal Datacenter, I'm going to go on and talk about the certificate authority. Yes, Project Personal Datacenter recently was given a new role to play with, the certificate authority. I may have brought it up during the last stream, I might not have. If I didn't, this is probably the first time that you're hearing about it, and you're going to want to know what a certificate authority is. I'm going to include links to those in the description, in addition to everything else. But long story short, when it comes to creating certificates for different server instances, a certificate authority is a very, very major, it's a very huge convenience. And I'm going to go and explain that right now. In cryptography, a certificate authority, according to Wikipedia, is an entity that issues digital certificates. Long story short, by having a certificate authority role on the server, specifically in Windows Server 2016 in this case, I now have the ability to issue my own certificates, which is great. It's a very nice convenience because I don't have to go to someone else to get them. I don't have to pay someone else for them on a regular basis. I can do that task myself now. And in addition to that, I can make it so that the rest of my machinery also trusts the certificates that I generate, which will get rid of some of the annoying warnings I've been getting recently whenever I go to actually play around with my VMs and instances. It'll also make it so that anyone who actually gets access to those instances in the future will not receive security warnings, and will also be able to actually use my instances and servers, or should I say my server instances in general, with confidence, knowing that they actually have a secure connection to them, a secure encrypted connection. So that's one thing. I get to actually issue my own certificates, which is a very huge convenience. I don't have to go to someone else. I don't have to pay them for that type of stuff. I can do that task on my own, and overall, it is just a very huge step forward for me because this wasn't even part of the original project. This wasn't even a part of the original project personal data plan. I'm stuttering. This wasn't a part of the original project personal data center plan, but now it is. And as a result, that's one less thing that I have to worry about when people connect to one of my new instances. Because up until now, I haven't been able to actually do much in the way of actually issuing my own certificates, or even if I was able to, they would show up as insecure or, oh, these are self-signed and therefore can't be trusted. Now I can say with certainty, yes, you can trust these certificates because I'm generating them myself, and then after that I'm assigning the certificates to each instance that I create, which allows me to actually track things such as, well, I can talk about that in a later video. But long story short, certificate authority increases the security of, well, slightly increases the security of how you'll be able to access this stuff if I open it to the public. It is a great way for me to actually ensure that not only are you connecting to what you think you're connecting to if you ever access one of these instances, but it also allows for me to actually get rid of some of those annoying security warnings that you would get. With that said, I'm pretty sure that the details behind that would probably bore many of you, so I'm going to move to the next topic. Next topic is I have to figure out why the virtual flash read cache still shows up. In the previous vCenter installation I had, I created a virtual flash resource pool or virtual flash cache pool that was just over 1 terabyte in size, if I remember correctly. I ended up getting rid of that vCenter instance for reasons I mentioned in the last live stream, and then I ended up creating a new vCenter instance that was installed on top of the Windows Server VM. That instance ended up not working after I re-promoted the Active Directory instance, and I ended up moving back to the vCenter server appliance, VCSA. And as a result of moving to the new VCSA on a new version, that one doesn't have any of the user interface or the UI tools to actually mess with and configure virtual flash. However, even though that new vCenter instance, that which wasn't used to create the virtual flash pool, and also doesn't have the UI tools to actually manage and create the virtual flash resource pool, didn't create it in the first place, even though that one didn't create the virtual flash pool in the first place, ESXi still sees that virtual flash resource pool. So I have to figure out whether or not that pool is actually still there, and if it is still there, how to manipulate that, how to assign that to different VMs, or whether or not I just need to actually reallocate those SSDs. Because as it stands, I'm kind of working under the assumption that it might still be there when in all actuality it might not still be there, and it might just be kind of lingering information that's no longer valid. So I have to look into that. On top of that, I also mentioned an upcoming Linux VM. I'm going to go on and bring up the details for the Linux VM right now so that you guys know what's going to be coming for it next. The Linux VM is going to be having the following roles. Yes, I have the information right here. The Linux VM will be running OpenSSH. I mean, most of you already know that as a secure shell or SSH. I'm hoping to actually get my first instance of StrongSwan running, which is another VPN technology that I haven't used before, so it'll be my first real outing or experience with it. I also fully intend to have a Nextcloud instance running on it, in addition to a server JRE for Minecraft servers. In addition to that, I was hoping to maybe toy around with free PBX and also some SMS technologies and maybe even a print server. But the print server is kind of a, it's not really going to have much impact because I don't have a physical printer or printing device currently. So that one might get pushed to the wayside. But yeah, the big players here are going to be probably StrongSwan, Nextcloud, and the server JRE, because those three right there are going to impact a lot of other instances that I plan to host in the near future, and possibly OpenSSH as well. StrongSwan will be something that I intend to run alongside SoftEther VPN, and I already have a secondary instance of SoftEther VPN running on Windows Server. So, if I remember correctly, StrongSwan is supposed to be, let me go and pull up the link for it right now. Wasn't StrongSwan actually being merged into the Linux kernel? I thought it was. I'm not sure if it is, but it is strong. Okay, WireGuard. Yes, WireGuard to be merged with the Linux kernel. My bad. Okay, so StrongSwan is not being merged into the Linux kernel. I was thinking of another technology. Correcting myself right there. I was wrong on that point. It is WireGuard that is being, or was planned to be, merged into the Linux kernel. And that might be old news. So don't even quote me on that one. But if you want more information on StrongSwan, what I can do is leave a few more links in the video description. Nextcloud is going to be a major player for me, though, because of the fact that it will allow for me to actually kill off things such as Google Drive, and also, if I remember correctly, not Mega, because I'm keeping Mega around, but Google Drive and one other service I have out there that I may have actually already deprecated. Already got rid of, yeah, Box. I still have a Box account sitting around that I want to get rid of with Nextcloud. So with Nextcloud, once it's rolled out, I'm going to pretty much start shutting down my Google Drive, hopefully, and also my Box account. I think Box actually gave 50 gigs free, and I have like a few terabytes sitting on the server right now, so that'll be completely useless when I move Nextcloud into 24/7 operation. Let me go and check my timing here. And yeah, I've been live for about an hour now. But that's enough detail about the Linux VM, because the real excitement is going to start when I actually start testing things to see what type of issues I'll have to resolve and what challenges I'll need to overcome. So no need to spoil surprises there. The next big topic is the UPS situation, uninterruptible power supply. This is one that started over a week ago. I purchased two UPSs from 2 different suppliers, and they are both taking a while to get in. I purchased those UPSs in response to a recent, how should I say this, a recent minor interruption in power delivery. So we had, or at least my household, had a power outage that lasted for a few minutes, and it ended up interrupting my telework for a little bit during lunch, thank goodness, so nothing important was interrupted. But that kind of got me thinking of the fact that if it happened during during something important, like maybe while I was in the middle of a call, well, there you go. That actually causes an interruption in the quality of service. So I went on and actually decided to purchase 2 UPSs as a result, to kind of try to shore up at least partially my operations in-house. One for the server and everything else in my room, that of which Project Personal Datacentre heavily hinges on, and one for some of the equipment that I use for telework and any other important pieces of equipment in the house that could actually use a UPS. However, those UPSs are taking quite a while to actually reach my location. So as a result, I'm kind of being forced to tough it out and weather the storm, kind of literally, and hoping that another power outage doesn't happen at an inconvenient time during that wait for the UPSs to get here. Because once the UPSs get here, I still have to actually configure and set them up. So yeah, now it's kind of a race against time, because as the spring and summer start to set in more, I'm going to see more inclement weather starting to show up, especially in my area. And the real question is, while those UPSs aren't here and hooked up, will any power events end up harming the server or anything else where I might not have spare parts to actually service the equipment? So that's my major concern at this point. That Project Personal Datacentre could actually be at risk, and if a power event does happen, will my equipment be damaged? Will the workstation that I'm using to live stream to you right now be damaged? Will the server be damaged? Will anything else that's necessary for the operations that you're seeing the results of right now be damaged? Like maybe the router that's sitting in my room, or networking equipment in general. Anything that's required for my operation that isn't protected right now, that isn't on a UPS right now, could be at risk until it gets here, which is why the wait for those UPSs is so excruciating. But with that said, that situation should be resolved hopefully within the next week, because the projections for the shipment are saying that those UPSs should be here hopefully by next week. Moving on to the next topic of new branding. The new branding that I mentioned in the last live stream should be ready by this summer, hopefully. Assuming that nothing else happens and assuming that no other life events happen in the background, I should be able to actually get the new branding rolled out, or at least begin to start rolling it out by this summer, or at least midsummer. With that said, I'm going to go on and put out another reminder, just a quick reminder for you guys, that Modpacks like Dynamic Nature and FIIK both require testing. So if you haven't already started testing the Modpacks last month, start testing them out and using every feature that you can. Anything that you didn't use before, just try to use it now, and mess around with configuration and stuff like that to see what does and doesn't work. Anything that doesn't work as of now needs to be snuffed out and figured out, so that in the next version I can actually start troubleshooting and addressing those issues, because when version 8 hits, that's when all the new mods are going to become kind of a regular thing. Anything that I wanted to add, like Archimedes ships and stuff, okay, Archimedes vessels, I got the name wrong. Anything that I wanted to add, like Archimedes vessels, can only be added once everything else has already been worked out. So I kind of want to put in the extra month in order to actually wait for everything to be tested first, which means I need you guys to really hop in on it, because I, as one person, cannot possibly find everything that's wrong with the mod pack. With that said, we have about another 30 days, because I'm kind of extending the test period to make sure that we catch everything. So if you catch anything, post it in the comments. If you catch anything, post it especially in the comments for the mod packs themselves. So on the mod pack page for FIIK or Dynamic Natures, post comments. Anything that you find, any bugs that you reveal, anything that needs to be changed in the configuration, post it. Post it like your life depends on it. Because the life of these mod packs depend on it. The reliability of these mod packs depend on it. The quality of these mod packs depends on what we find before we try to move to version 8.0. Anything we find now can be snuffed out before 8.0 gets pushed. I am willing to delay the release of version 8 as long as necessary to make sure that everything gets worked out before that. Now I'm going to go on and move on to the next topic, and probably the last topic of the video. That is, if I haven't already covered it. Right, the current seller's market. I think we already covered that. Solar winds, we kind of briefly covered on that. Right, creative outlets. As of now, I am trying to become more active, yet again, on platforms like Valor Cray, RP Nation, and also on Hayun's Dojo, yet again. I have been inactive on them, but I want to become more active. And it is for a project that I'm not really going to mention during stream right now, because there's a lot of detail to just that one project. And if I try to go into detail about it now, it could be very well an entire other hour of content to cover. And it would be a disservice to you guys and also to the work that everyone else is doing on it. So what I will do is I'll post links to it, and you guys will be able to actually read up on it and kind of see how am I doing on time? 1 hour and 6 minutes. You guys will be able to actually see what's there and be able to add to it, or maybe jump in as you want to. And also Toy House as well. Toy House is also going to be used as part of this kind of initiative as well. With that said, I believe I'm kind of at the end of the video. I was kind of hoping to keep it between 20 and 40 minutes. Instead, I ended up making it a full 60, but that was so that we could actually have an amazing guest star with us, and also so that we could actually kind of experiment with bringing new people in. So hopefully I'll be able to bring in Kid possibly next time, and maybe a few other people as well. Maybe someone who has a background in cybersecurity, so that we can talk more about solar winds in a qualified manner that actually matters to you guys, so that I don't do a disservice to that content, and so that I don't have to rush over things. With that said, I am now going to go in and start looking at the chat if I can. Where is the chat? Where am I? Right, there is nothing in chat currently, I think. But let me check anyway, because for some reason it's not showing up on Restream. I am happy to hear that the voices are coming through clearly for you guys. So I'm going to go on and leave the audio settings as they are for the next video. But anyway, I believe that it's now time for me to end the video. It's going on 1 hour and 10 minutes. I think that you guys have heard enough of my annoying voice. However, I hope that the new background is more than intriguing, and maybe I'll even get a new intro at some point in the near future to go along with the new branding that I have planned. With that said though, I'm going to go and end the video as I promised. This is Tapet Productions 105 signing out. If you like the video, feel free to leave a like. If you're new here and you want to actually contribute, feel free to donate, or even better yet, subscribe, because subscribing means even more than donating. Subscribing means that you are more likely to return for the next video, hopefully, and make sure to hit the bell icon as well, because of the fact that notifications on YouTube are supposedly wonky right now. Subscribe, hit the bell icon, and hopefully you'll be back for the next video as well, whenever I get to that. Hopefully I'll be able to do a gaming video sometime soon, but I've been very wrapped up in the other projects, that of which might not be as, some of which might not lend themselves too easily, might not lend themselves as easily to the creation of video content. and might be more reading heavy or research heavy. With that, I'm going to go ahead and end the video, and hopefully I'll have the video description for this live stream updated within the next 48 hours as I've promised. Peace!